Now, every year, thousands of children, including across the world, including right here in Africa, are diagnosed with cancer. But despite the terrifying nature of the diagnosis, there's a growing movement of hope driven by advancements in treatment, early detection, and most importantly, stories of survival. Early detection remains one of the most powerful tools we have in saving young lives. Yet, the stigma, lack of awareness, and inadequate access to healthcare often mean many children don't get the help they need in time.
So today we'll be hearing from two inspiring guests. First, we have Innomama Dickson, a childhood cancer survivor and passionate advocate who has turned a personal battle into a mission to help others with her foundation, Tumorphant Foundation. Also joining us in the studio, Dr. Nneka Nwobbi, who has dedicated her career to improving outcomes for children diagnosed with cancer with her foundation, Children Living with Cancer Foundation. Together, we'll explore the importance of early detection, what signs parents should never ignore, and how communities can rally around children facing the toughest fight of their lives. Welcome, ladies. Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah. So first, let's start from here inside of the studio. Dr. Nwobbi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Childhood cancer is not something that parents are actually looking out for. Sometimes when it does happen, it's because, they went in for something else and discovered that this is the issue or the realization that comes to them. But what could parents actually look out for when it comes to childhood cancer?
Incidentally, most of the ones that will come across come late. Not because the parents were looking for something else, and so they may have had symptoms and signs, and then they've been shopping elsewhere. Not coming to the right places. But then the signs and symptoms to look out for, them will have what we call the Siluan signs, S-I-L-U-A-N. The S is seek for medical advice for whatever it is in your child that is baffling to you, or recurring that you don't know what to do. The I is for the eyes. We have quite a lot of children who have cancer of the retinoblastoma, and there are ways to detect that. Swelling in the eye, boozing around the eye as if the child has had some injury. Meanwhile, the parents know that no injury had occurred in that child. The L is for lumps in any part of the body. Any part of the body that they detect a lump, that child should be investigated. A for aches and pains that are not going away. You understand? Then they use for any unknown, just like, every other thing, because we'll have signs that look like, in this environment, malaria, that is very similar to leukemia. And also there's fever, there's anemia, there's aches and pains, and then the child had been treated a couple of times for malaria. Meanwhile, the malaria keeps reoccurring. The malaria in foot keeps reoccurring. The anemia is persistent. They transfuse the child a couple of times, and the child is not getting any better. So these are the things to look out for. Sometimes, I think our parents should be more observant of their children. Unfortunately, in this rat race where parents wake up as early as 4, 5, and are out of the homes, early and come back late, the care of the children are left to the schools or the house helps in the house, who may not be
as observant as the parents
the mother would be.
I want to find out from Innomama if this was her experience as well. If you could tell us about your personal experience, Innomama, please.
Okay, so thankfully I was very fortunate. Good morning, by the way. I was very fortunate to have very present and very observant parents. And so what was being said is completely correct. If you're not very observant and the parents aren't present, or there's nobody in the house present, they're not going to notice the fact that there's going to be a difference in the child's way of walking, talking, their breathing. Because for me, I went to school and I came back with a limp. And so if my parents hadn't noticed the fact I had a limp, then there wouldn't have been any prodding or poking to eventually come to the cancer diagnosis. So yes, I would say my experience was pretty similar.
Very similar. And just how did that experience, just when you got your first diagnosis, what was the journey like for you, even getting your diagnosis, and the experience like for yourself and your family?
Yeah, so for me, because I was quite young, I don't have any personal recollection per se of the journey, but I have read my mom's book and I have spoken to my mom a lot and heard about it. And it was hard. What was said a couple of minutes ago about it being like cancer sometimes being mistaken for malaria or like other diseases that are so much more often recurring here in like Nigeria, is extremely like important, because we had gone to multiple hospitals in Nigeria, in Port Harcourt and in Lagos, and we had gotten like a possible malaria diagnosis, for example, and many other diagnoses, I think 3 or 4 others, none of which were correct. So yeah, there was a lot of like having to push and prod, because if you take what's given, sometimes at face value, without being completely sure and aware that there may be an issue, it may sometimes be attributed to something else.
I mean, and I'm glad you said, Doctor, I'm glad you said that, you know, it took them to several CTs, and in the end, she was glad that her parents didn't take it at face value. If not, and they still continue to push and prod to find out more until they got the correct diagnosis. Yeah. And so let's take it back home to Nigeria, and particularly, you know, for Africa, where our public healthcare system is another thing entirely. Even as adults, getting the correct diagnosis takes a longer time. What more children, right? So let's talk about the healthcare gaps in Nigeria. Doctor.
I think basically, well, I trained in Lagos. I had some of my residency in Lagos, so I know for certain that the gap would be between the private care sector, the primary health sector, because once they are sent to a place like, although I must say that yes, sometimes we may have some misdiagnosis, you know, but even when we have those misdiagnoses, is maybe from the labs, or you know, because is quite, and then even telling the parents that their child has cancer is another thing that is frightening. Most parents don't want to hear that, you know, and then even when they are told, let's do this, because we are suspecting that, it's not an easy thing for any parent to, you know, but the fact that there is that background knowledge that there's a possibility, because most people don't really know that children have cancer. So because of that, it's even harder to get them to believe. Sometimes you tell a parent that your child has cancer, and the parent takes off, and you won't see the parents again for a long time, because they will go from, you know, one hospital to the other, to native doctors, to the church, and, you know, before they now come back. And then at that stage, maybe the cancer had metastasized to other part of the body. It is more difficult to treat. Having said that, child cancers are one of the easiest, or is much easier to treat and, you know, achieve remission and cure than adult cancer. You know, so yeah, we have that deficiency, which is why for us, one of the foremost thing in the charity is to create awareness, not just amongst parents, but amongst healthcare givers. You know, you see something, be suspicious. Let it be one of the things behind your mind that, can this be? It probably will not be, but then if it is, you know, what do you do next? Do you refer? You cannot treat, you know, in a private hospital, so you must have to refer for proper diagnosis and then proper care.
I'm very happy that you at least gave a glimmer of hope there, where you said that it's better to manage when it's a child than if it gets to adulthood.
When they come in early.
However, how expensive is it? What's the rate of survival for children?
Okay.
To manage, I mean.
To manage
how expensive is it to manage?
It is very expensive, very, very expensive. Right now, a hospital like Lut have increased their fares. The medicines are, you know, on the high side. before, we could like give a child, let's say, 100,000 for their course, because they come in every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. But now that is not going anywhere. And what we do in Children Living Cancer Foundation is just to give chemotherapy. When we have other things that the child needs, then we go out of what we do, out of the norm, and ask people to help donate money for that. Let's say maybe radiotherapy or surgery or some investigation. PET scan is expensive. Radiotherapy is 1.something million.
Oh, wow.
Then if you now talk about, let's say, things like transplants, we started at Lutz, I think last year, and they started at 45 million. But then when you check how much one will spend outside of Nigeria, it actually makes sense to do it here.
How effective is it to do it? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm asking you all the questions when we still have Innomama. I'm sure Judith wants to get
Innomama, I mean, we're talking about treatment and recovery, really, right? From getting your first diagnosis to recovery and treatment, and now being healthy and strong as you are. Talk to me about that experience of the treatment journey and the recovery journey for yourself as a child.
Just like most chronic illnesses, the treatment and recovery, I would say, was long. Thankfully, it went well for me, and treatment was well not done in Nigeria, very well done. But when it comes to prices, just like Dr. Nwobbi was saying, it's expensive. And hence, treatment is expensive. And in a country such as Nigeria, where so many people aren't making that much, being able to have the treatment is almost unattainable for lots of families.
Yeah.
Thankfully, by the grace of God, I was able to get my treatment done. Like I said, there was obviously ups and downs, but thankfully it ended up and I was able to get treated. Recovery, as per usual, takes a few years. I feel like when talking about cancer or any sort of illness as a child or even as an adult, we attribute recovery to stop when medications stop being frequently taken. But I would say in my case, for example, recovery has been a lifelong thing in that there's still certain things I struggle with, like my dentition, for example, my height, having up and down hormones and everything, a lot of them being linked back to my childhood cancer. So recovery is, I believe, a process, a long one at that. But like I said, I'm much healthier, much stronger, and thankfully been in remission since I was declared cancer-free.
I find it very interesting. I find it odd that sometimes society forgets that children also have responsibilities as well, right? And so I'm sure there was school that you had to deal with, relationships, like, friendships, and trying to explain to your friends what's going on with you and hoping that they understand and being able to manage all those big feelings as a child. How was that like for you?
I'm actually quite glad you asked me that question, because in any of the interviews I've had, I've never probably had a chance to explain that. So I know when I was much younger, I don't remember too much of that. Because I do remember leaving school early some years, to go get my checks done, or, missing some days of school because I'd fall ill and it's a really big thing because I wasn't sure what was going on, etc. So that was a bit confusing, especially as a kid, but also not too confusing because since I was diagnosed so young, it's more or less been my normal since almost birth. What was a bit more difficult was understanding my feelings and explaining my feelings the older I got. When it came to, I had a lot of fears of relapsing, even though I knew the chances weren't extremely high. When I became more aware of what I went through as a kid, I started getting increased anxiety or fear about relapsing. And I went to boarding school when I was 10, so I was pretty young when I went to boarding school, but about the same age as most kids in Nigeria. And so not really knowing anybody, new country, new school, and then also having these increased fears of relapse and like being sick again was extremely hard for me to understand myself, like not even explaining to my friends or to like these new people that I've met about why sometimes I'm so sad and quiet and stressed. So I would say like for kids, it's a lot. I would say even more if you're diagnosed as an older kid, like a teen, preteen. I'm sure those diagnosed at that time have a lot more anxiety and stress, or like find it harder to explain themselves. But yeah, it was a lot. It continues to be a lot. It's something I still struggle with, though I'm what, 18, 19 in 6 months. It's a lifelong thing, at least my life so far.
Well, Innomama, thank you very much for sharing. Now, my next question goes to both of you and your foundations, Tumorphant and Children Living with Cancer. That's Ms. Dr. Nwobbi's foundation. Now, I want to give a bit of hope to parents who perhaps are passing through this, because it's scary when we talk about the management and how expensive it is and where you have to go and the psychological effect that it has on you. But what are your foundations doing to assist people who perhaps are living with this or have children that are going through this trauma or this cancer itself? Let me ask first, Dr. Nwobbi, please, how are you helping, or how are foundations across Nigeria helping parents to come to terms with this and also see them through the processes? Dr. Nwobbi.
One of the things that we didn't have in Nigeria was counseling. They tell you that your child has cancer and deal with it. Now, counseling not just for the parents, but like Mama says, the older the child gets, the more understanding the child has of what is happening to him or her, the more fear the child, the psychological trauma that child experiences is something that needs to be dealt with. So we would instead of counseling in Nigeria, who have trained 4 of us to be able to talk with these children. So in our midst, we have parents, parents who have gone through this process, who have, they have that background and they're able to feel more empathy towards other parents and children, and who have survivors, and those survivors, in fact, one of the counselors is the survivor herself. She had a bone cancer, had her leg amputated. What we try to do is to try to give hope. We meet every last Saturday of the month. This day was one of the days that we meet. So let me just give you a very, very brief story. This girl, Dara, had come to look. She had her leg amputated for one of these parties, and then there's this little girl, and she had the same diagnosis. They were going to amputate her leg, and she wasn't having any of it. When Dara walks into the ward, she sees her, with one leg, and was like, "What happened to you?" And she tells her what the issue was, and she got herself to this girl, and accepted to have that amputation. And I'm very, very happy to see that today she's cancer free.
That saved her life.
You get what
I
I'm
just
saying?
had shivers.
So that seeing other people who have survived it, going through their journey, telling their stories. So when we meet, we talk about what to do with other parents who are just experiencing, who are undergoing that journey at that time. What do we need to do? This is what I went through. How can I help you? You understand? So that is one of the things that, like I said before, we give chemotherapy drugs, but one of the things that we need to do more is to create awareness, which is what we,
Innomama, did that story send shivers down your spine as well? Do you have any such stories? How does Tumorphant also help people who are going through this?
I would say that story I was very happy when I heard that. It made me very hopeful. I would say very similar to Dr. Nwobbi's foundation, having a shoulder to lean on, whether it be emotional, faith-based, or just like a network people sharing stories
Yeah.
is one of the greatest ways you can help somebody going through like cancer treatment. I would say my mom wrote a book, for example, which is how we raise actually a good chunk of our funds through donations from this book. And the book is supposed to be a source of inspiration. So Tumorphant sort of creates a network as well in finding inspiration, hope, encouragement, other people going through the same thing, and us, the founders who have gone through the same thing. We don't directly provide chemotherapy, but we do raise funds for whatever treatment or medicine is needed for children. We try to support between 10 to 15 families a year, which, as Dr. Nwobbi said earlier, with inflation, up goes the prices. So we need to increase the amount of money we are able to raise to help these families. But yeah, so raising awareness, as Dr. Nwobbi said as well, is very important. I think near the beginning of the interview, she had mentioned that a lot of parents don't even know that children can have cancer.
Yeah.
So raising awareness is extremely important because we're talking about early detection. If they don't know that a child can get cancer, they're not going to look for cancer. So raising awareness, raising funds, and then having that inspirational network.
I mean, Innomama, thank you so much for sharing your story and just being here and just, we know you're all the way over the pond and you still woke up to join us on this conversation. We want to say thank you. But before we draw the curtains on this discussion, we have to talk about one thing, and that's religion, and how religion oftentimes deter parents from going and doing the right thing, if that makes any sense. Religion is good, don't get me wrong. If that's where if faith is good, don't get me wrong. But when you substitute faith for health or science, where science should come in, that's where it becomes a problem. So I'd like for us to sound the alarm on it, to just talk to parents and say, as much as you have faith, sometimes science is needed, or is an added combo, or how they say it, collabo, to assist.
That word was in my head.
Yeah, there we go. Mama, you go, and then Dr. Nwobbi.
Yeah, of course. That is, I'm very, very, very happy you brought that up. I grew up in a Christian household. I'm Christian, my mom's Christian, my dad's Christian, my family's Christian. And so we put a lot of importance on our relationship with God and our trust in God. But like you said, we are still human beings and we cannot do one without doing the other, on the hope that without taking any action, something will happen. And now I'm fully trusting God for any issue that comes into my life, whether it be disease or anything. But I also have to take action. God has given us tools that we have to use on top of our faith in Him. And so, like you said, I don't think science can be just left to rot because you're like, okay, God has taken the wheel. God has taken the wheel, yes, but you also have to take action as well.
Right. Dr. Nwobbi, just final thoughts as we wrap up because we're out of time.
I think basically, Nigerians are very religious people. But then what is there. And then we don't like to hear the truth. Like you said, I'm a Christian. I believe in miracles every day. But then there are tools or vessels through which these miracles occur. The fact that people have the knowledge to know what the diagnosis is and treat it is a miracle. So let us keep having that faith that God loves us so much that He cannot give us what we cannot handle. And then these people are placed there to help us achieve that thing that we have faith in God for, basically.
Doctor, thank you so much.